We're glad to have you with us. Welcome to Business Incorporated. I am BC Adebayo. Coming up on today's show, OPEC ranks Saudi Arabia first position out of 13 member countries with the highest GDP in 2019. President Muhammadu Buhari sends envoy to the U.S. over re-election bid of Akiwumi Adesina for the presidency of the AfDB. And Tunisia seeks late debt repayments from 4 countries as government announces more pessimistic economic and budget forecast for 2020. We kick off the show right away with intraday numbers coming from Africa, where the markets are all in the red. The South African Bourse is taking the heaviest hit with a 1.80% decline, while the Nigerian All-Share Index was down 0.19%. In Egypt, the EGX 30 was 1.15% negative. The Kenyan Bourse ended Monday's session down 0.19%. It's a similar situation in the Middle East, where most of the markets are also in the red at intraday, except in Qatar. The Abu Dhabi index was 0.45% less at intraday, while the Dubai index was 0.72% lower. In Qatar, the index was up 0.23%, and the Saudi Tadawul lost 0.58% as at intraday. Meantime, European stocks pulled back in early trade as a spike in coronavirus cases started to weigh on global market sentiment. Investors also have their eyes on latest developments in the UK as well as earnings reports. Well, Orich Bats would be telling us how all of these are shaping up the markets at the moment. Good afternoon, Orich. Are other European countries likely to tilt the same path with the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, who was going to decide on totally banning Huawei 5G equipment in the UK?
Yes, Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, has banned Huawei from the British 5G telecommunications network. He said that it has to be removed from the network by 2027. And the purchase of new equipment from Huawei will be banned after December 31st, 2020, and all equipment by the Chinese must be removed from the networks by the end of 2027. This decision was expected today. It was already alluded to by the Culture Minister, and he explained the change in policy by the sanctions imposed by the United States, which apparently now changed also the security assessment in the UK. Now, Huawei 5G equipment has already been banned in other countries, Australia starting as early as 2018, New Zealand and Canada also effectively banning the equipment. Germany's decisions, interestingly, won't be coming until September. But the large operator here in Germany, Deutsche Telekom, the German government is still a shareholder, by the way, is strongly lobbying for continuing to use Huawei 5G equipment simply because of its technological qualities.
Earnings season starts in earnest in the USA. 3 major banks reported results. An event also closely followed in Europe. What did the results look like, and how did investors in Europe respond? A moment, but let's continue with the other markets now, talking about the Asian markets, where China's trade data for June came in above expectations, but the markets were largely negative. Mainland China stocks declined, with the Shanghai Composite down 0.83% to around 3,414.62, while the Shenzhen component dropped 1.079%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng fell 1.24% as at its final hour of trading. In Japan, the Nikkei 225 slipped 0.87%, while the Topix index declined 0.5% to finish its trading day at 1,565.15. South Korea's Kospi dipped 0.11%. Shares in Australia also saw losses, with the S&P ASX 200 down 0.61% to 5,941.1. Meanwhile, advanced estimates by the Ministry of Trade and Industry released today show Singapore's economy entered a technical recession after shrinking 41.2% in the second quarter compared to the previous quarter. Well, let's talk more about Huawei's troubles in the UK with our London correspondent, Juliana Olayinka. Good afternoon, Juliana. So we see the drama continues to unfold. Lord Brown is stepping down as Huawei's UK chairman ahead of the Chinese tech giant being barred from playing any role in Britain's 5G network. Does that spell more troubles for the tech firm in the UK?
Well, potentially. I think it's all happened now. The UK Culture Secretary Oliver Dowden has delivered a statement on behalf of the British Prime Minister in Parliament just recently, saying that the Huawei will no longer have a role in building of the UK's 5G network. He went on to say that by the end of this year, and all telecommunications companies in Britain cannot purchase any Huawei equipment. In fact, it will be illegal, and any 5G components or any Huawei infrastructure that's in British technological infrastructure will be pulled out by 2027. It was a pretty long statement delivered in the House of Commons. I believe Oliver Dowden is still answering questions from cross-party MPs, but this has long been going on. We know that Huawei is the biggest telecommunications giant in the world. One of the issues that a lot of nations have been having with Huawei is because of it is Beijing-based, and there are some suggestions and allegations that China are using Huawei to spy on other nations. Huawei have, of course, denied this refutedly over the past few years. In January, after a long decision, Prime Minister Boris Johnson did make the decision to allow Huawei enter into some of its network. But now what has been crucial and what's going to determine how this spat plays out over the next couple of months is that Britain have put the decision down to a technical reason. They said, following Boris Johnson's announcement in January, that there were some components banned from America, which would make it impossible to use Huawei. So they haven't discussed the COVID-19 pandemic and China's handling of it. They haven't discussed their relationship with Five Eyes, the security network involving New Zealand, Australia, America and Canada. They have put this down to a technical decision, which is crucial for Britain if they want to maintain this new modern relationship with China. I must read it out because it's important. A statement from Huawei. This was just released moments ago. Their spokesperson, Ed Brewster, said they're utterly disappointed in Britain's decision. It's bad news for anybody in Britain with a mobile phone. It threatens to move Britain into a digital slow lane, and so on and so forth. They said they will be putting out a further statement later. It's worth mentioning, Bissy, that Huawei have been in Britain for 20 years, and the cost of ripping them out of Britain's digital infrastructure is likely to cost over £2 billion, and it will also delay the rolling out of 5G in Britain by another 2 years. So it's a major story here in the UK.
I can imagine, Juliana. Of course, we have our eyes on that story and will continue to monitor it. Meantime, the UK spending watchdog, the Office for Budget Responsibility, has warned that the economy was on course to shrink by 12.4% in 2020, with borrowing set to rise to a peer-time high. And this comes just as the official data show the economy grew by 1.8% in May. Why do we have that discrepancy, and how are the markets reacting to all of this at intraday?
There doesn't appear to be a discrepancy, actually, Bissy. All the data shows that what the Office for Budget Responsibility is showing is where the economy is going, even though there was that 1.8% growth in May, month on month. The previous month, there was a decline by 20.4%, and the month before that, it was about 5.9%. So at the moment, the British economy has shrunk by a quarter. And so even if the estimates of growth continue in the trajectory that they're going in, Britain, in a best case scenario, would be down by 10.4% in 2020. And that's the best case scenario. And the Office for Budget Responsibility statistics are even better than the statistics we had a couple of weeks ago from the OECD, which predicts a fall of about 15.4%. So if you look at the data from all aspects of the globe, Britain is really going to sink. I think now the sort of issue for the Chancellor and Boris Johnson is how low the sink will be for the UK. At the moment, unemployment lies at about 3.9%. According to the audit office, that could rise to about 20%, which is absolutely significant and it would be something that we've not seen before. And that, of course, will affect the economy, because if you don't have a job, you don't have money to pay for things. So at the moment, even though we are seeing slight growth, will that growth continue into the V shape that everyone had hoped for, or will it be more of a W, which is what I was explaining and drawing to Chimmy earlier this morning?
Now, wearing a face covering in shops and supermarkets in England is to become mandatory from July the 24th, or face a fine of up to £100. Now, how are citizens reacting to that, especially as experts fear up to 120,000 COVID-19 winter deaths?
Yes, it's probably best to point out that 120,000 deaths is a very a broad estimate. I think earlier in the year they were saying about 1 million, so I don't want to scare anybody. But yes, it's coming to fruition. I think it's been a pretty a complicated discussion here in Britain and across the world. Do you not wear a face mask? I believe in about May, early May, there was government advice on the website saying that you should wear a mask if you're in an enclosed space. That wasn't mandatory. However, the London Mayor Sadiq Khan did make it mandatory for people to wear face masks on public transport from June the 15th. Now, the government have done another U-turn. They've been doing plenty of U-turns, according to the opposition and some critics, during the COVID-19. And they have said from the 24th of July, you do have to wear the face mask. Some of the issues that people are having is, why not today? Why is Britain always constantly at the back burner of changing their decisions? We've done this with several other things, including the track and trace system and including quarantine. And there are some suggestions that it's this slowness of the government, which is to why, we are in the position we are with having one of the highest COVID death rates in the world. But they have said from July the 24th, people will have to wear them. And going back to your initial question of how will people feel, most, I presume, having listened to some of the vox pops on the streets today, they're not happy with it. But of course, anything to reduce the death rate and reduce the impact of the second wave of the COVID-19.
All right, what's most important is that everyone is staying safe this period. Thank you, Juliana. We'll see you again tomorrow. All right, Orich is back with us to tell us more about what's happening in the European scene. Just before we lost you earlier, Orich, you were talking about earnings season, which actually starts in earnest. Tell us how the investors in Europe are responding.
Yes, the banks in the United States have reported their second quarter earnings or respectively losses. For example, Wells Fargo, one of the largest banks in the United States, had a hefty loss in the second quarter, $2.4 billion, after making over $6 billion previously. And here the reason is mainly loan provisions. And in contrast to Citigroup and JP Morgan, which also reported earnings today, Wells Fargo doesn't have as much leeway in having trading and investment banking compensate for super high loan provisions due to Corona. But that's what made JP Morgan and Citigroup come through this crisis at the end of the second quarter a little better, although when you look at the numbers, they're still quite drastic. The profit at JP Morgan was halved, and at Citigroup, it dropped by 7.3%. Bank shares in Europe not reacting with losses, most of them pretty well on the positive side. Deutsche Bank gaining 1.5%, HSBC about 1%, BNP Paribas in Paris also gaining.
Thank you again, Orich. We'll see you tomorrow. Still to come on the program, an analysis of the price movement of a staple commodity, cowpea. Do stay with us. Welcome back. The Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, has ranked Nigeria second place out of 13 member countries with the highest GDP in 2019. In its 2020 annual statistical bulletin, Saudi Arabia comes first with a GDP of $793 billion, followed by Nigeria, the only African country in the top 5 with $476 billion, and Iran in third place with $475 billion. Other countries included in the top 5 category are the UAE and Iraq. Meanwhile, the report also shows that Nigeria generated $206.06 billion in revenue from crude oil exports in the last 5 years. Exports of Nigeria's crude oil to Europe was also estimated to have declined to 680,600 barrels per day in 2019 from 1.06 million barrels per day in 2018. Cowpea, or beans, is a highly nutritive staple and a major source of protein. It's predominantly produced in Africa, and Nigeria accounts for about 48%, which is about 3.4 million tons of total production, which is estimated at 7.1 million tons. However, the price of beans has surged by 25% to 17,500 naira per bag, per 50 kg bag from 14,000 naira as at last year. A research analyst at the financial derivatives company, Dumebi Iyeke, joins us now to talk more about the price movement of this staple commodity. Good afternoon, Dumebi. Tell us what's responsible for this price change that we've seen.
I mean, BC, as at last year, there was no COVID-19 pandemic, and it's not far-fetched to say that the pandemic has really disrupted economic activities across various markets, be it the stock market, the financial market, and very much so the commodities market. Now, bringing this to the domestic commodities market here in Nigeria, there are several factors, both demand and supply, that have affected the price of major commodities like beans. And on the supply side, we have the planting season, we have higher transportation and logistics costs. We also have supply chain disruptions, and this is because cowpea or beans was predominantly produced in the northern region of the country. Now, bringing it to the demand side, there are several things that have affected consumption patterns and demand patterns in the country. Some individuals have lost their jobs, some have had their salary cut, and, schools are not opening, restaurants aren't open. So demand patterns have changed, and, it has really declined. We also consider the fact that people have, transitioned from taking snacks and to healthier eating options. So these are some of the factors that have affected or caused the price change in beans.
And what about the fact that there's a belief that immune system boosters can reduce COVID-19 infections and fatality rates? Of course, foods that are rich in protein like beans are highly recommended for that purpose. Is it possible that the price of beans could spike on the extra demand by health-conscious consumers?
I mean, BC, we've seen the infection cases of COVID rise so high. I mean, global cases are, over 13 million with fatalities over 500,000. And here in Nigeria, cases have surged, above 30,000. And, we have fatality rates of about 744 as at this morning. So, yes, there's a fear for, people trying to boost their immune system and make sure that, they're not susceptible to the virus. So, but the facts remain that people with compromised immune systems, are more susceptible to the virus. And, if you eat meals that are healthy, that are high in vitamin and, that are immune boosters, there is the fact that, it could help, reduce the chances of you contracting the virus. Or if the individual contracts the virus, it reduces the chances of, a really high fatality. So people have, transitioned to eating, healthier food options. And, taking it back to when the lockdown was, recently imposed and when Nigeria recorded the index case of the virus, there was panic buying, and we saw an increase in demand for commodities like ginger, garlic, and this is because people perceived that if they consume these commodities that are high in vitamin and high in protein, it would boost their immune system. So if individuals perceive that taking beans will help boost their immune system, we could see an increase in demand for beans, and this would in turn, spike the price of beans.
A potential increase in the demand for beans could be an incentive for farmers to practice crop rotation in favor of beans cultivation and supply. Now, if this were to happen, do you think that the switch to beans by farmers and the apparent shortages of other commodities that are displaced could lead to supply distortions and price volatility in food commodities in general?
Yeah, BC, crop rotation, is widely practiced among farmers, and they do this, to encourage or boost rather the soil quality and reduce pests and diseases, of which legumes like beans are, really used for crop rotation. So the process is that if there was, if a particular landmass or area was used for planting maize, so once that maize is harvested, the farmer could now plant beans. So that's how the crop rotation process goes. And legumes are really used for this particular process because they are high in nitrogen. They give the soil good nitrogen content. So if farmers perceive there's an increased demand for this, a rational supplier would want to increase their supply to satisfy that demand, to meet that demand in the market. But the opportunity cost for making that decision would be a reduction in the supply of other commodities that would be replaced by beans in this particular process. And if this happens, no doubt there could be supply disruptions of these particular commodities in the market, and in turn, there could be price volatilities in the market for various commodities. What will happen for beans is, due to increased supply, the price of beans will reduce, and for the other commodities that are being displaced, what will happen is their prices would increase. So we could have such price, variation and volatilities in the market if this decision comes to play. But the truth of the matter still remains that there is an increasing need for the value-added chain in this particular commodity and other commodities in the agricultural space, so that there's need for increased storage facilities, better storage facilities rather, and the need to improve the production of this particular commodity. So in cases like this, we have enough to cater for the demand. So there is no so that the supply shortages won't create such a wide demand-supply gap that prices would, spike outrageously.
Maybe Yeke, research analyst at the FDC, thanks for your input on the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
And back here, President Muhammadu Buhari has sent a special envoy led by Mustafa Chike-Obi to the United States to meet with President Donald Trump over the re-election bid of Akinwumi Adesina for the presidency of the African Development Bank. The envoy will discuss the possibility of the U.S. to strongly support Mr. Adesina, who is under investigation for alleged abuse of office. And Tunisia has asked 4 countries to delay the debt repayments as government announced more pessimistic economic and budget forecast for 2020 due to the coronavirus pandemic. The Minister for Investment, Slim Azabi, says the government is negotiating with Saudi Arabia, Qatar, France and Italy to push back the payments, and also hopes to arrange a new deal within 4 months with the International Monetary Fund. And that's our show today. Thank you for watching. I am BC Adebayo.